165. The girl looked at the protagonist very maliciously and incredulously. The protagonist got angry and noted that he had saved her, and she was not satisfied with this. Even if the disposition did not grow, then fine, so she also falls. 95. He is a real villain in her eyes. Looking at the beaten guys, King asked if Chen thought it made sense. He thinks she's going to fall for all this, just like the rest of the girls. She was standing at the bus stop waiting for the bus, and suddenly these gangsters came up. Then he shows up and pretends to be a hero. Walking straight at him, she said that Chen was overestimating himself, and he underestimates her. And the protagonist was surprised by her words. Then she grabbed his t-shirt and pulled him towards her. She screamed that Yuki was even ready to leave the student council because of him. And now he decided to hit on King. After she let him go and called him a bastard, she said that he disgusted her. The protagonist was shocked by her words and did not even know what to say. He thought she was making a big deal out of a molehill and that she had some kind of persecution mania. He told her that it wasn't like that. He wanted to explain to Chairman Qin how it really was. King replied that she did not need his explanations. She hoped that he would hold his head and treat Yuki well. If he tries to do something like that again, she will cut off his lower organ. King went ahead, and the protagonist was just shocked and even a little scared. Then one bandit began to come to his senses and held his head because he was in pain. The protagonist was very angry and hit the bandit with the words that damn her. An ungrateful bitch, and it's not worth helping such people. He felt that he had kicked something, but he did not understand what, and he did not care. After that, they show us Hochung University. He was very angry and felt that the more he thinks about it, the angrier he gets, and felt that she was very harmful. Immediately, someone started calling his phone. The protagonist took it and noted that it was too late and did not know who it was. It was Xiao Royu, and the protagonist was even more surprised. After answering the phone, Royu asked Chen if he was free tomorrow. He was surprised and asked what she wanted. The girl replied that she had no lessons tomorrow, and she would like to invite him to watch a movie. The protagonist was surprised again, because tomorrow Chairman Zhao invited him to watch a movie. It happens. Royu added that this was the first time she had invited him, and he couldn't refuse. The protagonist agreed and noted how he could refuse if she asked. There are 2 dates in one day. One in the morning, one in the evening. As they say, a big king needs a big swim. 166. In the morning, the protagonist drove his car to the university and did not understand what kind of nonsense it was. Chen texted a friend where he was, and he replied that Chen should wait a little longer. After that, we are shown how his friend cried and told Chen that he invited a girl to go to the cinema with him. But she refused, and he had already bought tickets and invited him with him. Initially, the protagonist thought that he would have to watch 2 films today. It turned out to be 3. Plans change at the speed of light. On the other hand, he's his friend. He often helped him when he didn't even have money for food. At 1 o'clock in the afternoon, he will go with a friend. At 3 o'clock with Zhao, and at 8 o'clock with Xiao Royu. If he wants to do it all today, that's the only way. Then he looked to the side, because he thought it was Van. But it was a beautiful girl who was wearing makeup. The girl gasped and apologized. She was so busy setting up a marathon that she got into the wrong car. The protagonist replied that it was nothing like that, and she should come out. She should pay more attention next time. And the girl was just shocked by his words. The girl replied that even though she got into the wrong car, she hoped that she had met the right person. She thought about his words. If she went out, she wouldn't be able to pick him up. Driving such a car, and even such a handsome man, she can't miss him. She then handed him her phone and asked if he could add her to the chat. She thinks that they are very suitable for each other. The protagonist, using his phone, replied that she didn't have a phone, which made her even more surprised. Unlike Brother Wang, he would never fall into such a trap and smiled maliciously. The girl got angry and agreed to leave. Immediately, the door opened and Wang asked Xiaoyu why she was here. The protagonist and Xiaoyu were surprised when they saw Liu Wench. Van noted that she had said that she was going to the hospital to see her mother, and therefore would not be able to go to the cinema with him. And now she was getting out of his friend's car and thought that she had lied to him. The protagonist realized that this is the woman who refused Brother Wang. He hoped that his friend would understand correctly. The protagonist got out of the car and told Van that he would explain everything now. Wang was angry at Du Xiao because Chen was a complete stranger to her. He pointed at her and added that she saw a cool car and decided to hit on a guy. He didn't like her and asked her to come out. The two of them have absolutely nothing to do with each other. She just shamelessly molested him. The protagonist was delighted and began to shake his head, saying that this was how it was. A moment later, both guys got into the car. She drove ahead, and Du Xiao was surprised that Wang had such well-off friends. She didn't understand how, because Wen is just a loser who survives on 800 yuan a month, 167. After that, they show us the cinema. The protagonist and his friend were inside and watching a certain movie. Wang was still crying and asked Chen why he was so bad at it. There are a lot of beauties around him all the time, and he is constantly unlucky. The protagonist replied that he did not know himself, and he added that it was not particularly pleasant to constantly drive away the girls who were chasing him. At this time, the two girls in the row above were discussing them. The first one noted that it was strange that two guys were at the movies together. The other advised her to keep her voice down, because maybe they were a couple. The protagonist said that the first one who shows that he needs a partner turns out to be the loser. Relationships are a battlefield. You need to be ready to fight for life and death. The more he tries, the more he is disrespected. It's not a matter of what measures he takes, but how strong he is. Only fools give money to women, but real men spend it on women. Van was surprised and noted that it made sense. He grabbed his hand and called him a master, considered it an epiphany, and asked the protagonist to teach him how to be strong. The protagonist was a little surprised and asked to calm down, because people are looking at them. And the girls were literally in love with them and didn't understand what was going on. The protagonist replied that he had nothing to teach him. He's just a little prettier. He has a little more money and a little more women around him. To be honest, it's not easy. They, simple guys, would never understand. Wang was already getting angry and told Chen to stop, because a little more, and he would not hold back and kill him. After the movie ended, both of them got out of there. Van said he felt better after talking to him. Lately, he's been doing things that strain him. There will be an opportunity in the future. The protagonist replied that he did not need to wait for this opportunity. He could repay him right now. Then he took him by the hand and added that a little later, they would say, in 2 hours, he would dial him. He would help out a lot. Van was surprised and replied that he would do it, but did not understand why. Already familiar girls came out of the cinema and thought that these two were a couple, and the guys drooped a little. The protagonist left and decided that he needed to make a phone call in order to escape from Chairman Zhao and go on the next date. After that, we are shown another cinema with Imax. He was very happy when he saw Zhao and realized that he had made it. The girl was already starting to get nervous, because it's half an hour before the movie starts, and Chen Yuan is still not there. Immediately, someone greeted her, and the girl was a little surprised. The guy introduced himself to her. His name is Banshee. He saw that she was standing there alone, and asked if she wanted to add him to the chat. Zhao apologized and replied that she was already dating someone. The Banshee replied that he wouldn't ruin their date if he just took her number. If she doesn't like him, she'll delete him from her friends later. She should just fulfill his little wish. The protagonist put his hand on the Banshee's shoulder and said that the girl had refused him. It is not necessary to drive the girl to despair. He wanted to show him how it was done. Then he leaned Zhao against the wall and put his hand next to her. He visited her and noted that she was so beautiful and asked if she would like to find a more cozy place and get to know each other better. The banshee got angry and noted that Chen was acting like a gigolo. Zhao replied to the protagonist in agreement. Immediately, the banshees and everyone around were very surprised and did not believe that it really worked. 168. After that, it was almost evening. We are shown how a certain soldier kicked off a rocket, that the ground cracked under him. Zhao looked at the protagonist and wasn't too upset. She asked the protagonist if he was interested, because he was on the phone all the time. The protagonist immediately replied in denial. It's just that he's in trouble at home. Zhao understood that his family owned such a fortune, so he was probably under a lot of pressure. They are ordinary people, so carefree in this regard. She remembered how well he played the piano and realized that the others only saw that he was incredibly talented. But they don't even think about how much effort it cost him. Such results can be achieved only through blood, sweat, and tears, starting from childhood. He could fight, play various musical instruments, and much more. He received the education and upbringing of an aristocrat, but never complained about anything, just silently shouldered this burden. He did such a job, and she takes up his valuable time, makes him go to the movies with her. She's just a terrible woman, and she started crying. Then she put her hand on his arm, which made the protagonist very surprised. Then he looked at her and saw that Zhao was crying a lot. The protagonist is a little tense, because this is an action movie. But for some reason she is crying. After they left, Zhao asked the protagonist if he was hungry and why they shouldn't have dinner. The protagonist was surprised and just wanted to answer when his phone started ringing. He remembered telling Van to call him and noted that now was the time. The protagonist answered the phone and greeted his friend. Chen was surprised that everything was so serious and said he was leaving immediately, while Zhao behind was surprised. He immediately hung up the phone, and Van didn't understand what was going on at all. Immediately, the protagonist told Zhao that he urgently needed to leave. His friend got into something serious. Zhao replied that everything was fine. If he had things to do, then he could go. The protagonist quickly ran away, and Zhao thought that Chen's friend must have had something serious happen. He is such a kind and noble man. The protagonist got into the car and thought that he was just a genius, and now he could head on to Zaoroyu. 169. After that, it was dark outside, and they show us huge high-rise buildings. The protagonist wrote to her that he was already near her house, and Joyu was delighted and added that she would be down in 2 minutes. He was glad that this was the last time for today. It is incredibly difficult to fight on several fronts, and he will not do this anymore. Immediately, Joyu called the protagonist, and he turned around. We are shown Joyu, who apologized and hoped that he did not wait very long. The protagonist thought she was just beautiful. Looking at her, Chen didn't care what style she chose. Everything suits such a beauty. Joyu blushed a little and asked if they were going, and he agreed. Then the two of them went ahead, and the protagonist thought, if today's date goes well, maybe their relationship will move to a new level. After that, they were already at the cinema and were happy when watching the film. Then they went to have a bite of meat, and they also had fun. After all, night fell, and the protagonist brought Joyu to her house. When she got out of the car and wished him a good trip and a rest, she thanked him for the company, and she had a lot of fun. When the girl turned around, the protagonist addressed her. He asked if he could join her, and if she would give him some water. The girl blushed deeply and was a little surprised. After that, they show us the huge Joyu house again. The protagonist decided to take a shower. At this time, the girl was sitting on her couch and wondered what was wrong with her today. She usually does not behave like this. She didn't know if he was going to have a drink and leave, but he ended up staying with her because it was too late. Yes, she also gave her consent to this and was very worried. She didn't know what if he suggested something like that and didn't understand what to do. But if it was him, It wasn't that she was against it. Then she buried her face in the pillow and didn't understand what she was thinking at all. After that, she looked at the protagonist's pants and was surprised. She took movie tickets and didn't understand why there were 4 of them, and assumed that he went to the movies with other girls. 170. After that, they show us the night city again, and only in some apartments the lights were on. The protagonist appeared drying himself and said that he had washed up. Immediately, he drew attention to the table on which 4 tickets were lying. Joyu Zilea noted that 4 tickets had fallen out of his pocket and asked how to understand this. She thought that he had gone to the cinema with other girls today. If she doesn't like her, he can just say so. He became a part of her life and meets with others behind her back. The protagonist did not know what to say, and the girl asked if he absolutely did not care about these feelings. Her disposition dropped by 10, and Joyu told him to leave because she did not want to see him. Her disposition dropped by 10 points again, and the current disposition was 75, and he realized that he needed to act. He was very tense at first, because this situation was difficult. But then he calmed down and smiled, and noted that he had assumed that this could end. He thought it was time to act, and said that in her eyes he was so untrustworthy. Just a couple of tickets can offset all his efforts. The girl screamed and asked if he wanted to discuss it. Immediately, the protagonist took out his phone and started calling Liu Wen. He held out the phone to her and said she could ask him if they had gone to the cinema today. The girl wondered whether to take her phone or not, but the call was still coming. Immediately, Van woke up and asked if he had seen the time at least. Royu took the phone and greeted him. She wanted to ask if they went to the cinema with Chen Yuan today. The guy agreed. They watched Warrior 14. They had originally agreed with Du Xiaoyu, but she couldn't, so he suggested to Chen Yuan that the tickets would not be lost. Immediately, a realization came to Van. He shouted that it was Chen Yuan's phone and asked where she got it from and thought they were together. He shouted that Chen was a dog and asked what he had hooked her with, and he just didn't believe it. And the protagonist noted that Wen was also called a friend. Joyu understood him and apologized for the trouble and said goodbye. The protagonist decided to get dressed, and Royu wondered if she was mistaken, but immediately thought that Liu Wen was just covering for him. Fortunately, she is familiar with Du Xiaoyu and decided to make sure by calling her. Royu greeted her and asked if she and Wenj had been to the cinema today. The girl said that he invited her to go with him. She refused. But then a guy came for him in a red Ferrari. If she had known that he had such connections, she would have agreed. The protagonist asked her if she was sure, and if she wanted to check his payment history. Joyu didn't know what to say. Then he turned around and noted that he was very disappointed. Royu immediately admitted that she was wrong. She begged him not to get angry. She would not let him down and begged for forgiveness. Immediately, the protagonist left her apartment and closed the door. In fact, he was panicking a lot because the exposure was close. Fortunately, he had prepared for this. Otherwise, there would have been a disaster. 171. After that, the next day came, and they show us the protagonist's university. Royu apologized to him. She made a mistake yesterday. She noted that he was right, and they needed to trust each other and apologize again. Chen replied that everything was fine. It bothers him too. He just needed to explain everything and also apologized. Joyu noted that it was her fault, but he apologized anyway and thought he was so good. Her disposition increased by 21 points. The protagonist happily exhaled, but the points were back, even one more than it was. The system reported that Xiao Royu's disposition had reached 96 points. Reward: 10 gain points. But you shouldn't do that next time, because he almost got caught, and therefore panicked. But it's a great reminder. It is worth differentiating related objects. Some may remain at the level of useful, but with others, it is necessary to maintain good relations and increase their level of disposition. Then he looked up and noted that only children should make a choice, and he needed everyone, because who did not dream of a harem, and such vulgar thoughts made him bleed. At the same moment, two girls walked past the protagonist, and the first one said that she had heard that Senior Tang sponsored some kind of competition for the title of the strongest basketball player. Another confirmed this and added that all this takes place in the gym. She offered to go and watch, because basketball players are so courageous. The protagonist turned around and was especially surprised when Tan was named the strongest basketball player. He became interested and wanted to go and see it. When he entered the gym, he noted that there were a lot of people there. The girls shouted at Tan that he was very cool, and they wanted children from him. The protagonist, listening to this, thought that all this was a show-off. He felt that Tan had hired actors to stand out against their background and considered him sick. Immediately, we are shown Leal and the Joker, who noticed the protagonist, and Leal ran away. She immediately ran up to him and thought it was a coincidence, and the protagonist greeted her. The Joker was very angry. Immediately, someone tapped the protagonist on the shoulder, and he turned around. It was Julian who greeted him and asked if he liked basketball too. The protagonist is already upset because another girl has appeared. All three beautiful girls surrounded him, and a certain guy noted that Zulange was very beautiful and asked who this guy was. His friend explained that it was Chen Yuan from the Faculty of Humanities. Not only Zhu Liu, there's also He Jiying. She left her boyfriend for him. Immediately, King and Zhao appeared, who suddenly appeared, which scared the guys, and King asked how they could discuss girls behind their backs. And the guys screamed and said they would never do it again. King was very angry and thought that all this was disgusting. It also stinks. Zhao tried to calm her down and just offered to look at the guys. Immediately, Tang noticed Chen and angry, did not understand what he was doing here, and why there are so many girls around him. They are blind, because they do not notice such a handsome man like him, and therefore he even cried. Then he saw Yuki and noted that he had a chance to improve. He's been playing basketball for 2.5 years. Chen just can't win. He immediately threw the ball at the protagonist, but he managed to react and grab the ball. Chen asked Tang what that meant. He lost at the piano game and now decided to take revenge on him in this way, and it's kind of childish. Tan was surprised by his words and replied that he was taking on too much and offered to play one-on-one. She will give him 3 balls. Another guy asked Tang if he was joking, because Chen was going to shit himself. 172. We are again shown the entire university, and even the sports hall outside. The protagonist was angry that he wanted to play and tensed up. He threw the ball and noted that of course he would keep him company. When the ball was flying at Tana, he laughed and noted that it was immediately obvious that the man had never held the ball in his hands. We couldn't catch the ball, and it hit him hard and Tan flew away, and everyone around was in shock. Zhao noted that Tang, the captain of the basketball team, could not catch the ball thrown by Chen Yuan. King was angry because she relied only on brute force. That's all men can do. Tan fell on the floor, and the guys started asking the captain if he was okay. Tang noted that Chen is incredibly strong. He looks so insignificant, but in fact he is so strong. The protagonist approached him and asked what one-on-one meant and offered to play 5-on-5, so they would assess the overall level of their team. Immediately, Jinying, King, and Zhao were greatly surprised. Also, the rest of the observers, including all the girls, Leal, the Joker, and even the judge, were shocked. Tang was also perplexed by his words. After all, the players and referees are all his people, but he still wants to play. He smiled maliciously and thought he was a fool. It's not 5 against 5, it's 1 against 9. He's finished this time. After that, 4 guys stood around the protagonist and the game began. Tang ran forward with his sword and told them to make way for him. The blonde man, when he ran, said that he would teach him a lesson now. Smear him, and then Yuki will see what a jerk he is. 3 guys surrounded the protagonist so that he could not get out at all and somehow pick up the ball. The protagonist noted whether Tang Ziwang thinks that he is not aware that all this is a deaf production. We told the team to go to hell. He alone is more than enough. He told the system to give him 30 years of experience as a basketball player. If he shows off, then he does it in full. Tan was still running forward and laughing. He said that it was time to show himself. And the girls shouted for Tan to win, because they believe in him. He jumped up and decided to show everyone his signature move. Immediately, the protagonist ran at high speed. Then he also jumped up and took the ball away from him at the very last moment. He easily just knocked it out, which made Tang a little surprised. Everyone watching was just in shock and thought of only one thing. The basketball team captain's attack was blocked by Chen Yuan, and it's unbelievable. The guys from Tan's team didn't understand how he got there. No one saw him. He seemed to evaporate and instantly appeared in another place, and the others screamed how it happened. Tan was also shocked and even began to panic. He did not understand how this was possible, and he simply did not believe, because some kind of illusion. The protagonist began to spin the ball on his finger and said that it was his turn now and called Tan. And behind him the referee began to blow the whistle and picked up a yellow card. The protagonist got angry and realized that this was a dishonest game and agreed with it, but was surprised that the judges were also helping Tan. 173. The ball was given to Tan, and he threw it into the ring and of course hit it. He ran almost from the middle and was credited with a goal. Tan noted that even if he is a good player, so what? All the judges were bought, and I didn't know what he would do with it. There are rules here. He's too naive. The observers began to get indignant and did not understand what it was. The girl asked her friend if it was according to the rules, as if the judge did not see what was happening. And the girl asked if he thought the judge was judging. The guy told his friend that it was a friendly game, and it would be somehow wrong. Such a thing, and even within the walls of the university, is simply terrible. The protagonist noted that Tang Zuwang had seriously angered him. He may not respect him, but he will not tolerate disrespect for the sporting spirit. He knocked all his rotten guts out of him for that and frowned. The protagonist tensed up and prepared to show them the real game. He quickly ran forward and ran past Tang, who noted that Chen was very fast. He ran past everyone and jumped up and prepared to throw the ball. A moment later, the ball hit the ring and fell down, and the other teammates picked up the ball. Tan shouted at them and said that they should surround him and not let him throw the ball. Then he pointed his finger at the protagonist team and said that they were also blinking their eyes, and they were upset. After that, the protagonist continued to fight against everyone. The guys surrounded him and did not let him escape. Then the protagonist smiled maliciously. He just jumped up with the ball, and the guys didn't understand what else it was. He threw the ball in the air and hit it right in the ring. The referee and other players did not understand how he did it, and did not believe that such a thing was even possible. Everyone understands that this is nothing more than a production. But the protagonist tried so hard for some reason. The referee recalled when he was still a little boy. His father told him that refereeing was the basis of the game. When the whistle sounded, his conscience should be clear. The judge, remembering this, realized that this was possible for the sake of respect. Then the team remembered how they were still small, and the coach told them that victory or defeat is determined not by the score on the scoreboard, but by whether they made all the efforts. They thought that all this was possible in the name of love. Everyone started crying, and noted that compared to him, they are such moral freaks that playing basketball is blasphemy. The protagonist turned around and saw that they were drooping, and thought that they had decided to give up. The protagonist ran forward. The fans didn't understand what was going on. Tan was also surprised, and did not understand if they were crazy, because everyone just stood there and did not play. The protagonist was surprised himself and stopped running, and Tan felt that his virtue had crushed the others. Yuki blushed and noted that this was it. True sportsmanship. Tan was screaming hard and still didn't understand what was going on and whether they needed more money. 174. After we are shown the score, the protagonist has already received 60 points, and Tan has only 2. Chen felt that Tang Zhu had insulted the rules of the basketball game. Running forward, he said that Tan deserved this humiliation, and he got ready. Tan was already very tired and sweating. He felt that he only needed to play well in defense. Then it will still be possible to preserve at least a little dignity. He still has a chance and got into the block, and the protagonist got ready. Then the protagonist decided to jump. Immediately, Tang ran up to Chen and elbowed him in the chest. He noted that Chen had brought trouble on himself. He will rest in the hospital. Immediately, Tan's elbow cracked in several places, and the bone broke. He screamed violently in pain, and his eyes turned red. Tan fell to the floor and did not understand how it could be that his arm broke against his ribs. Immediately, the protagonist jumped onto the ring and scored a goal. Zhao Yuqi's disposition exceeded 96 points, plus 10 gain points. Lin Shudong's disposition exceeded 96 points, plus 10 gain points. Zhu Liu's disposition exceeded 97 points, plus 10 gain points. He Zhiyin's disposition exceeded 95 points, plus 22 gain points. Tan grabbed his hand, and the protagonist said that taking into account his abilities and moral qualities, he was not worthy to be the captain of the university team, to compete with a jerk like him. It's just disrespectful to his abilities. Tan got very angry because of these words and shouted that he was an arrogant bastard. They'll see who's who. Sooner or later, he'll get it from him. The girls were discussing whether someone had filmed this brilliant moment. Another replied that it was so mesmerizing that she forgot about the phone altogether. Jiying blushed and, looking around, did not understand where this Chen Yuan was. Then she saw Zhao beside her, who had also prepared a bottle of water, and blushed. All 4 of the protagonist's friends were standing next to each other and were at a loss. After that, they show us the university once again. The protagonist was very tired and was glad that fortunately he managed to escape. If he hadn't had time, he would have faced a terrible choice, and who would have taken the water bottle from. After that, the protagonist came to his room and thought it was great. It was very pleasant for him to wash off the dust and sweat after physical activity. Immediately, a notification came to the protagonist's phone that the loafer from the Chatterbox chat had applied for friends. The protagonist was surprised and thought that this was another rich boy. The protagonist, wiping his head, added it, and after greeting asked what was the matter. The guy replied that he wanted to know if he needed a wife. Chen was greatly surprised by his words and even a little scared. 175. Gao Xuanian won the title of Best Actress at the age of 22, is known as the leader of the 4 Celestials, an incredible beauty. But relatively recently, a scandal broke out with her participation. Her reputation was significantly tarnished. She also faces a penalty of 30 million. Gao Xuanian is the heiress of the Gao Corporation, whose business has not been going very smoothly lately, and 30 million will have a critical impact on her condition. The blonde added that she was his sister. He asked to meet with the protagonist because he thinks he can help her. He is the second son of the Gao family. The protagonist realized that he wanted Chen to marry her and become related to him. The blonde man panicked and replied that this was not the case. He wrote that because he thought he wouldn't pay attention otherwise. He hit the table that the tea had already spilled out and added that his sister had been framed. She would have to pay a penalty. And then, in embarrassment, he asked if the protagonist could buy her a villa. The protagonist thought a little, because he actually wanted to buy a house for himself. Then, introducing Gao Xuanian, the protagonist thought even more. He was delighted, because he thought she knew how to spend money. The protagonist put a mug of coffee on the table. He said he could help. We need to make an appointment, and he would like to take a look at the houses, and the blonde was delighted. He grabbed the phone and said he was setting the time now. He thought that the lone wolf was really so generous, and it was very timely. The blond man heard that he had paid off a large sum of money to Zio Corporation. If his sister becomes his wife, it will be great. It is quite possible. After that, we are shown the house of Gao Xuan, who shouted at him to tell him to get out. She knows he's good, but all those rumors, she won't be able to accept it. And she put the phone on the bed. Then she started hitting her pillow, which broke through it and screamed that these stinking old men had got her. Everyone needs only one thing. After that, she plopped down on the bed and wondered what to do. You have to pay so much money for violating the terms of the contract. She just wanted to be in a movie and didn't understand if it was really that difficult. Then her phone started ringing again. It was her brother who told her that he had found a sponsor for her. Now money is not a problem. The girl was surprised and asked what he was talking about and whether he had decided to do pimping. The blond man noted that it sounded terrible. He's talking about Mr. Lone Wolf, who is constantly glowing on the internet. He promised to buy her a house, so it's all right. The girl heard about the lone wolf and imagined him as a fat, middle-aged man. 176. Immediately, the sister screamed violently and asked what kind of heresy. Some old bastard again. She had already begun to think that he wanted her to be deceived again, and warned him that as soon as he returned home, she would beat him. The blonde calmed down and asked his sister to just trust her, because the lone wolf is cool. He will be with her soon, and Gao has to show the house. Before switching off, he added that she should not forget to behave like a good girl, and his sister managed to tell him to fuck off. Then she began to scream violently and thought that all men were the same, because even her brother could not be trusted. After that, she held out her fist and called her name and said that even if she died, she would never take money from a man. After a while, they show us Gao Sayan's house again. The protagonist arrived there in his car and noted that this is a great area, relatively close to the villa that he bought Zhao Yuki. Great location. He didn't know that this house belongs to the Gao family. He didn't even know that he had bought a house practically next door to the star. After a moment, he went to the door and rang the bell. When she heard the horn, she was surprised that he arrived so quickly. After that, she thought that he had never communicated with a woman in his life. The protagonist continued to press the bell, and the girl, after getting dressed, said that she was already on her way and that he should stop the call. After a moment, she opened the door and said that he was so grown up, but still hadn't learned his manners. He has to stop harassing this poor call. Immediately, she saw the protagonist and blushed in embarrassment. The protagonist introduced himself to her, who asked the girl her name and explained that he was a friend of Gao Lan. The girl was surprised, and the protagonist walked past with her, saying that he was sorry that he had bothered her. When the protagonist walked forward, Gao Sayan blushed even more and did not understand. This is the lone wolf. He was very young, and also very handsome. She has been acting in films for so long, but she has never met such charismatic men. The protagonist walked forward and sat down on the sofa and told her not to be so weary and that she could sit down. And the girl was surprised and thought about it, because this is her house, and came to her senses. She sat down opposite him and asked if he wanted to explore the house. The protagonist replied that the house was great and he had already looked at it. Chen explained that the most important thing is not the house. Xuan was wondering what then. She didn't understand what he was hinting at. She already had a bad feeling. The protagonist told her that he wanted her to become his lover. Immediately, the system linked her to him. Her current location level is 35, and her attractiveness index is 92. Chen understood that there was no need to beat around the bush. It was better to immediately dump everything that was there, and wondered how she would react. The girl thought about it and was surprised by his words. She thought that he wanted to insult her, and now they would not look at who was whom. Then she noted that he was quite straightforward. She agrees to his proposal but she has conditions. First, she wants a car worth at least 10 million. Second, an apartment in Shanghai. Third, he has to invest about 500 million yuan in it. As an actress, of course. If he thinks that these conditions are too harsh. But before she could finish, the protagonist was delighted and asked if she was serious, and added that everything was fine and he would do everything. He asked if there was only one apartment. It was very small, and they could buy one for his brother and his parents. Gao Xuan was very confused and thought that he might have something wrong with his head. 177. Then Gao Lan went to his sister's house and noted that it was a lone wolf car and realized that he had not left yet. Then he looked into the house and asked his sister. She was alone in the house, and where was the lone wolf? His car was at the entrance. He thought that Chen was still here, and Xuan was in shock. Xuan asked if he was referring to that Ferrari, and added that Chen had given it to her. She was still in a daze. Lan was shocked, because he gave her a car worth more than 20 million. Xuan said that not only that, he also gave her money. My brother was delighted and calculated that this money was a deposit for the purchase of a house, and how much. She showed him the phone and said that he had sent her 100 million and showed her the bill. Lan reckoned that he hadn't even bought a house, but had already invested 120 million. He must have liked his sister very much. Immediately, the protagonist began running around her and scattering rose petals. He wanted them to become related and laughed. And Gao Xuan thought that something was wrong with her brother. Then she remembered again how the protagonist had told her to be his lover. The girl did not understand what was wrong with her. He offered her something like that. She should hate him. But he gave her money, and even without any demands in return. When leaving, the protagonist said that he would register the car in her name, and he could use the money. It won't be enough. Maybe I'll call him. He just doesn't like it when beautiful girls suffer, and said goodbye to her. He didn't even try to molest her, because he's very decent. For this, her disposition increased by 10 points. Then, clutching her face and blushing, she decided that he was not so bad. Her disposition grew again, and the current one was 5. After that, we are shown the protagonist's university. They show us the graduating class and their photo shoot. At this time, King was trying to explain to Yuki that Chen Yuan was a bad person and that she should forget about him. After her release, she won't be able to protect her anymore. Zhao tried to reason with her and said that he was not what she thought he was. King added that Zhao saw it too. After the basketball game, a whole bunch of girls gathered who wanted to treat him to water. He doesn't observe male ethics at all. Zhao understood this, but replied that Chen had left and had not accepted their help. He's good. He doesn't think he did anything wrong. King thought she was in trouble. She also decided to tell her something. After her birthday, he set up everything and tried to make himself look like a hero in her eyes in order to get her into bed, and asked if she thought Chen was good after that. Zhao picked up the phone and said that King sometimes overdoes it. It's just not worth treating all men as if they are a priori bad. Maybe she should see a psychologist. Chen Yuan is a good man. He has a keen sense of justice and has demonstrated this more than once and told her to watch. He didn't even know she was going to be at her birthday party. So how could he have set it up? Immediately, King thought that she was really mistaken. She also reflected that she was demonizing men. Immediately, she turned around and ran away, and Zhao asked where she was going, because they hadn't taken a photo together yet. She didn't understand how it was, and that it was all her fault, and she blushed a lot.